The sound of heavy machinery shattered the pre-dawn silence of Maple Grove Estates, a quiet suburban neighborhood that had always prided itself on pristine appearances and strict regulations. Michael Ray stood at his bedroom window, coffee mug forgotten in his hand, watching in disbelief as bulldozers tore through the dense woodland that bordered his 5-acre property. It was 5:37 a.m. on a crisp October morning when Michael first realized something was terribly wrong. The trees, some of which had stood for decades, were being systematically cleared, their ancient trunks splintering like matchsticks under the relentless metal jaws of construction equipment. He recognized the lead operator, Thomas Garrett, the HOA president he clashed with multiple times over the years. Michael's family had owned this land for 3 generations. His grandfather had purchased the property back in 1954, a wild stretch of woodland on the outskirts of the developing suburb. Over the decades, Maple Grove Estates had grown around them, transforming from a handful of modest homes to a meticulously manicured community of upper-middle-class residences. But the Rios property had always remained untouched, a stubborn patch of wilderness that defied the neighborhood's obsessive need for uniformity. Throwing him on a jacket, Michael rushed outside. The morning air was sharp with the smell of diesel and freshly torn earth. "Stop!" he shouted, striding towards the nearest bulldozer. "You can't do this. This is private property." Thomas Garrett emerged from a black SUV parked at the edge of the clearing, clipboard in hand, and a look of calculated indifference on his face. At 55, he was the embodiment of suburban power. Expensive suit, perfectly trimmed, salt and pepper hair, and the kind of confidence that came from years of unchallenged authority within the HOA. "Good morning," Michael Garrett called out, his voice smooth and controlled. "We're making some improvements to the community infrastructure. I'm sure you'll understand." Michael's blood ran cold. "New improvements? This is my land. You have no right to be here." He pulled out his phone, ready to call the police. But Garrett simply raised a hand. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," he said, a subtle threat underlying his calm tone. "The HOA board has approved this project. We've determined that your unused land represents an opportunity for community development." The scale of the destruction was becoming clear. Markers have been placed suggesting multiple building sites, not just 1 or 2 structures, but what looked like 7 distinct locations were being prepared. 7 cottages on land that Michael knew with absolute certainty belongs solely to him. As morning light broke through the remaining trees, Michael realized this was more than just a misunderstanding. This was a calculated invasion, and Thomas Garrett was at the center of it. The HOA president had always been ambitious, always pushing the boundaries of his authority. But this was something else entirely. Little did Michael know that this was just the beginning of a battle that would test everything he believed about property rights, community power, and the lengths some people would go to get what they wanted. The first machine's blade bit into the earth again, a mechanical growl that seemed to echo Michael's growing sense of violation and impending conflict. By noon, Michael had contacted every legal resource he could think of. His first call was to his longtime family attorney, Robert Sanderson, who arrived at the property looking equally perplexed and concerned. The lawyer walked the property line, measuring and examining the markers, his experienced eyes catching every detail. "This is unprecedented," Sanderson muttered, pulling out a thick file of property documents. "Your grandfather's original land deed is crystal clear. There's no easement, no right-of-way, nothing that would permit the HOA to do this. Michael's hands were shaking with a mixture of anger and disbelief. How can they just start building? There must be permits, approvals, something. A quick investigation revealed a web of bureaucratic manipulation that would have impressed even the most seasoned political operatives. Somehow Thomas Garrett had managed to forge what appeared to be official approvals. Stamps from the county planning department looked genuine, but Sanderson's trained eye detected subtle inconsistencies. These are forgeries too, confirmed, spreading the documents on the hood of his Mercedes. Clever ones, but forgeries nonetheless. The local police proved frustratingly unhelpful. When Michael filed a report, the responding officer, who Michael recognized as living in Maple Grove Estates, seemed more interested in protecting the HOA's interests than investigating the clear legal violation. Looks like a dispute between you and the HOA, the officer said dismissively. You'll need to take this to civil court. As afternoon turned to evening, the construction continued. Michael watched in helpless fury as foundation work began on the first of the 7 planned cottages. Each machine's movement seemed to mock his sense of ownership. Each scoop of earth, a deliberate invasion of his family's legacy. That evening, Michael discovered something even more disturbing. The deep search through county records revealed that Thomas Garrett had recently purchased a struggling real estate development company. The 7 cottages, Michael realized, were more than just a community project. They were a potential money-making scheme. His research uncovered a pattern. Garrett had a history of manipulating HOA regulations in other neighborhoods, always walking a fine line between legal and illegal. But this time he had crossed a clear boundary. When darkness fell, Michael installed additional security cameras around the property's perimeter. He knew this was just the beginning of a fight that would require every ounce of his resolve. The land his grandfather had cherished, the property that represented generations of his family's hard work, was under siege. What Garrett didn't know was that Michael wasn't just going to roll over. A former investigative journalist with a reputation for tenacity, Michael had exposed corporate scandals before. This would be his most personal investigation. YET.AS. He reviewed the day's evidence in his home office. A notification popped up on his computer. An anonymous email with a subject line that made his blood run cold. Back off or else. The battle lines had been drawn, and Thomas Garrett had no idea what was coming. The first sign of trouble came 3 days after the anonymous email. Michael was working in his home office when he heard the first crunch of gravel outside. Through the security camera feed, he spotted 3 men in dark SUVs pulling up to the property line. They weren't construction workers. Their build and demeanor screamed muscle more than manual labor. Robert Sanderson had warned him this might happen. Garrett's not just a real estate manipulator, the lawyer had said. He has connections. Be careful. Michael activated his home security system and stepped onto the front porch, deliberately making his presence known. The men were spreading out, some moving towards the tree line, others positioning themselves around the property's perimeter. Their coordination was too precise to be random. I know. You're here, Michael called out, his journalist's voice carrying a calm that belied the adrenaline racing through his veins. Whatever Garrett sent you to do, it's not happening. The largest of the men, a 6 feet 4 inches mountain of muscle with a neck that seemed to merge directly into his shoulders, stepped forward. Mr. Ray, as he said, his voice a growly monotone. We're here to ensure the project continues smoothly. Michael recognized the thinly veiled threat These were intimidation tactics, pure and simple, yet exposed corporate bullying before, but never experienced it this personally. The irony wasn't lost on him. The HOA, supposedly a guardian of community standards, was now employing thugs to strong-arm a property owner. His phone's already recording, capturing every moment. Years of investigative journalism had taught him the value of documentation. "You're trespassing," Michael stated clearly. "I have video evidence and I'm prepared to file both criminal and civil charges." The big man laughed, sound more like a bark than genuine humor. "Mr. Garrett suggests you might want to reconsider your position. The cottages are happening with or without your cooperation." What they didn't know was that Michael had already set multiple plans in motion. His contacts at the local newspaper were investigating Garrett's real estate dealings. His lawyer was preparing injunctions and, most importantly, he had begun digging into Thomas Garrett's past. Every secret, every connection. As the men continued to prowl the property's edge, Michael noticed something else. One of the SUVs had a partial logo, something connected to a local construction company he recognized from previous investigations. It was a piece of the puzzle, another threat to pull. The confrontation lasted nearly an hour. The men made no move to physically approach the house, but their presence was a clear message. Back down or face consequences. As they finally drove away, Michael knew the real battle was just beginning. Garrett had escalated from bureaucratic manipulation to outright intimidation. And Michael Ray was not the type to be intimidated. That night, as he compiled his evidence, a new email arrived. This time it wasn't anonymous. It was from a source inside the county planning department, someone who was willing to blow the whistle on Garrett's systematic corruption. The subject line read, "Everything you need to know about Garrett's real operation." Michael smiled. Sometimes the truth had a way of finding its way to the surface. The email from the anonymous county insider proved to be a gold mine of information. Michael spent 3 sleepless nights meticulously cross-referencing documents, tracing financial transactions, and building a comprehensive dossier on Thomas Garrett's web of corruption. The story was more complex than he'd initially imagined. Garrett wasn't just trying to build 7 cottages on Michael's land. He was orchestrating a massive real estate laundering scheme that stretched back nearly a decade. The HOA presidency was merely a strategic position that allowed him to manipulate property lines, zoning regulations, and local development plans. Bank records showed suspicious transfers between Garrett's real estate development company and several shell corporations. Property assessments revealed a pattern of systematic undervaluation and rapid resale, always just inside the legal gray area that made prosecution difficult. Michael's contact at the planning department, who identified herself only as Alina Martinez, had been gathering evidence for months. Her encrypted files revealed something even more shocking. Garrett had been using his HOA position to target specific land owners, acquiring prime real estate through a combination of legal manipulation, intimidation, and bureaucratic sleight of hand. "He's been doing this for years," Elena had written in her most recent communication. "Your property is just the latest target. There are at least 3 other families who have been quietly pushed out of their land through similar tactics." The investigation took an unexpected turn when Michael discovered a connection between Garrett and several local politicians, campaign contributions, backroom deals, and a network of mutual favors that protected him from serious scrutiny. On the 10th day after the initial land invasion, Michael received a call from a local investigative reporter, Sarah Chin, who had been tracking similar stories of real estate manipulation in the county. "You're not going to believe this," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Garrett's operation goes deeper than we thought. There's evidence he's been working with a regional development consortium that's been systematically buying up properties around the county." The pieces were starting to come together, as 7 cottages on Michael's land were just one small part of a much larger scheme. Garrett wasn't just trying to steal a piece of land. He was part of a sophisticated operation that was reshaping the entire county's landscape. But Michael knew that exposure would be dangerous. The men who had visited his property were just the beginning. Each piece of evidence he uncovered increased the stakes, and he was certain Garrett would not go down without a fight. That evening, as Michael was organizing his files, lights in his home flickered. A moment later, his computer screen went black. Someone was sending a message, a not-so-subtle reminder that he was treading on dangerous ground. In the darkness of his study, Michael realized the true nature of the battle he was fighting. This was no longer just about a piece of land. This was about exposing a systemic corruption that threatened the very foundation of community trust. And he was determined to see it through, no matter the cost. The counterattack came swiftly and brutally. Within 48 hours of Michael's deepening investigation, the HOA launched a multi-pronged assault designed to discredit and silence him. First, they filed a series of frivolous complaints, violations for grass height, mailbox positioning, and even the color of his window shutters. Each citation carefully crafted to create a paper trail of supposed misconduct. Then came the financial pressure. Michael discovered a line had been placed on his property claiming unpaid HOA fees, dating back to years before he even owned the home. But Michael had anticipated this. Years of investigative journalism had taught him to keep meticulous records. Every document was digitized, backed up, and stored in multiple secure locations. He began live streaming his interactions with HOA representatives, turning their harassment into public record. Sarah Chen from the local investigative team became a crucial ally. Her newspaper began running a series of articles that slowly unraveled Garrett's network. Each story peeled back another layer of the complex scheme, revealing connections to local politicians, real estate developers, and a web of shell companies. The turning point came unexpectedly. Alina Martinez, the brave whistleblower from the county planning department, contacted Michael with a bombshell. She has secured encrypted copies of internal communications that directly linked Garrett to a broader conspiracy of land seizures and illegal development. "They've been doing this for years," Elena told him during an encrypted video call. "Your property is just the latest target. We've identified at least 17 families who have been pushed out through similar tactics." As the pressure mounted, Michael noticed changes in the neighborhood. Longtime residents began reaching out, sharing their own stories of harassment and suspicious land deals. What had seemed like isolated incidents were now revealing themselves as a systematic pattern of predatory real estate practices. Garrett's response to the mounting evidence was telling. Intimidation tactics escalated. One night, Michael's security cameras captured a group of men attempting to tamper with the boundary markers on his property. This time, he had clear video evidence, not just of trespassing, but of attempted property manipulation. Local police, previously reluctant to get involved, could no longer ignore the mounting evidence. An internal affairs investigation was launched, focusing on the department's previous handling of complaints against Garrett and his associates. Michael knew the real battle was far from over. Garrett was a powerful man with deep connections, and he wouldn't go down without a fight. 7 cottages continued to take shape on Michael's land, a physical manifestation of the ongoing conflict. But something had changed. Michael was no longer just defending his property. He had become the focal point of a much larger fight against systematic corruption. The community was watching, and more importantly, they were beginning to understand the true nature of what was happening. As winter approached, the partially constructed cottages stood as a testament to Garrett's audacity and Michael's unwavering determination to expose the truth. The final chapter was yet to be written, but Michael was ready. He had become more than just a landowner fighting for his property. He was now the voice for every family who had been silenced, every landowner who had been threatened, every community member who had been betrayed by those meant to protect